Good evening, government critics. I'm Alexa, resident Nookie Spooky Girly, and today I'm discussing a topic that I'm always down to chat about: leaked information from the government and how awful things can be that we don't know about. As a gal who went to university for journalism, I have a lot of respect for government whistleblowers, folks who understand that some things are too important to keep quiet, and I hope that comes across today. So I've got a question for you, as always. Which government leak do you consider the most significant? Let me know in the comments, and welcome to the top 5 scary secrets leaked by government officials. Number 5, Pentagon Papers. One of the original government whistleblowers was Daniel Ellsberg, a champion of free speech who passed earlier this year at the age of 92. So we're gonna go back a couple of years right now. We're gonna go back to 1971, when then 22-year-old Robert Rosie Rosenthal got a call from his boss at the New York Times. He was told to go to room 1111 of the Hilton Hotel, bring enough clothes for at least a month, and not tell anybody. Rosie was part of a team called in to publish the Pentagon Papers, an explosive history of the United States' political and military actions in Vietnam that shattered the government's narratives about the war. Now, Ellsberg, a former military analyst, leaked the secret papers to the press. Rosie shared a close bond with Daniel because of the papers. The two guys spent more time together probably than anybody else on Earth, secretly photocopying them, like all 7,000 pages. Now, back in the day, photocopying meant a lot of time of standing there and waiting. It wasn't the digital incredibleness that we know now. So when Ellsberg leaked the Pentagon Papers, he was turning his back on a long career close to power, immersed in government secrets. His work as a nuclear war strategist made him fear that a small conflict could erupt into a nuclear nightmare. By 1961, he had started consulting for the Kennedy administration and was now directly involved in planning America's nuclear war strategy. Now, in this era, the strategy was called First Strike, meaning we launch our nuclear weapons before the other guy does. So I go first, or else game over. Now, when the Vietnam War flared, Ellsberg worried his worst fears would be realized. So he was thinking, maybe if I leak this report, it could help stop the war? So soon he was secretly copying all 7,000 pages of history that he would come to be known as the Pentagon Papers. And he was showing them to anybody he thought could help. He was showing them like a couple pages here, he had them stashed under his bed, here, there, everywhere. Now, he didn't know it at the time, but even the Secretary of Defense had concluded that Vietnam was a lost cause. He had ordered a secret study about decision making. And it was so secret, even the president didn't know what was happening. This study, which covered the entire history of the conflict going back to the Second World War, would later be called, yeah, you know what I'm gonna say, I've said it enough times, the Pentagon Papers. The papers revealed that the United States had expanded its war with the kabooming of Cambodia and Laos, coastal raids on North Vietnam, and Marine Corps attacks, none of which had been reported by the American media. The most damaging revelations in the papers revealed that 4 administrations, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, and Johnson, had misled the public regarding their intentions. For example, the Eisenhower administration actively worked against the Geneva Accords, which, if you don't know, that's a big deal. The Kennedy administration knew of plans to overthrow the South Vietnamese leader at the time before his death in November of 1963. The coup. Johnson had decided to expand the war while promising, "We seek no wider war," during his 1964 presidential campaign, including plans to level North Vietnam well before the 1964 United States presidential election. President Johnson had been outspoken against doing so during said election, and claimed that his opponent, Barry Goldwater, was the one that wanted to harm North Vietnam. Not me. It's the other guy. Ellsberg showed some of the documents privately to sympathetic policy experts, including Marcus Raskin and Ralph Stavins of the Institute for Policy Studies. Now, they declined to publish the papers, but passed on some of them to and recommended he seek the New York Times reporter Neil Sheehan, whom Ellsberg had first met while in Vietnam. Now, before publication, the New York Times sought legal advice. They were like, hey. So they went to their regular outside counsel, Lord, Day & Lord, and they advised against publication. But in-house counsel, James Goodall, prevailed with his argument that the press had a First Amendment right to publish information significant to the people's understanding of their government's policy. So then, President Richard Nixon woke up to the biggest leak in American history, and at first didn't want to do anything about it because it kind of embarrassed the Johnson and Kennedy administration more than his. But after failing to persuade the New York Times to voluntarily cease publication on June 14th, Attorney General John N. Mitchell and Nixon obtained a federal court injunction forcing the New York Times to cease publication after 3 articles. Now, on June 18th of 1971, the Washington Post began publishing its own series of articles based on the papers. Oh yeah, Ellsberg had given them portions. He had a friend, former Rand Corporation colleague Ben Bagdikian, I tried. They met up in a hotel in Boston. Now on June 18th, Assistant U.S. Attorney, William Rehnquist, asked the Washington Post to cease publication. After they said no, he sought an injunction, again, in court. Now, according to Ellsberg, in 2017 and 2021, 19 newspapers in total eventually drew on the papers for their investigative work. And eventually all that stuff was overturned, they were able to publish again. Number 4, GITMO. So if I had $1 for every time I've made a reference to punishment being worse or equivalent to something at, Guantanamo, I'd be able to afford a home in Toronto by now. Back in April of 2011, WikiLeaks, along with the New York Times, NPR, and The Guardian, and other independent news organizations, began publishing 779 formerly secret documents relating to detainees. This event was referred to as the Guantanamo Bay Files Leak, or the Guantanamo Files, or GITMO Files for short. You know how much I like short forms? The documents consist of classified assessments, interviews, and internal memos about detainees, which are written by the Pentagon's Joint Task Force Guantanamo, headquartered at Guantanamo Bay Naval Base. The documents are marked secret and no foreign, which is information that is not to be shared with representatives of other countries. So what were the deep dark secrets? Oh, no biggie, just more than 150 innocent Afghan and Pakistani folks, including farmers, chefs, and drivers, were held for years without charges. The documents also reveal that some of the prison's youngest and oldest detainees, who include an 89-year-old man and a teen, suffered from fragile mental and physical conditions. So what happens there? Well, legally speaking, we don't know a heck of a lot, but let's cover what we do know. Thank you, WikiLeaks. Folks in charge at GITMO are allowed to use what are officially called enhanced interrogation techniques, which is systematic punishment of detainees in ways that most of us consider unethical. The techniques included forced nudity, painful stress positions, sleep deprivation, hypothermia, and until 2003, waterboarding. I'm pretty sure they still use it unofficially, so let's break down how they do that and other icky torment stuff, because The prisoner would be bound to a declined board with their feet raised and the head slightly below the feet. Material is wrapped over their face and water is poured over them, asphyxiating the prisoner. To elaborate more on stress positions, is where prisoners are forced to stand, handcuffed, and with their feet shackled to an eye bolt in the floor or wall for more than 40 hours, which creates an intense amount of pressure on the legs, leading first to pain and then muscle failure. There's also abdomen strike, where a hard, open-handed slap is dealt to, well, your abs. Doctors consulted over the matter advise against using a punch, which could cause lasting internal damage because apparently it's less than humane if you don't. Granted, we don't want to get confused with an insult slap, which is an open-handed slap delivered to somebody's face to cause pain and fear. Now lastly, there's the dreaded shaking, where an interrogator forcefully grabs the front of the prisoner's shirt and, shakes you until, whatever. See, the strikes and shaking are just stuff I've experienced by working in public entertainment, so good to know I can endure that. But still, why was this happening and why did it take so long for us to find out? Number 3, the Tiananmen Papers. So the book is presented as a compilation of selected secret Chinese official documents relating to the 1989 Tiananmen Square protests and massacre. I'm just going to call it T-Square for short from here on out. So the protests known in China as the June 4th incident were student-led demonstrations held in T-Square, Beijing, China, lasting from April 15th until June 4th of 1989. After weeks of unsuccessful attempts between the demonstrators and the Chinese government to find a peaceful resolution, the Chinese government declared martial law on the night of June 3rd and deployed troops to occupy the square in what is referred to as the T-Square Massacre. The documents in both books are said to have been made available by a Chinese compiler under the pseudonym Zhang Liang, whose identity is hidden to protect the individual from potential persecution. Now, the papers combined various government documents with editor's notes and footnotes to illustrate the situation within the Chinese Communist Party surrounding the time of the protests. The documents are arranged in chronological order from April to late June, and the book portrays a sense of factionalism and power struggle within the party, in which the reformist faction is headed by General Secretary Zhao Ziang, and the conservative faction by Premier Li Peng. Zhao appears to have a conciliatory attitude to the students' demands, deeming the protests to be mostly patriotic. Li had more of a hardline approach and attempted to convince paramount leader Deng Xiaoping that the protests were causing turmoil and that the students were networking. Now the book portrays Deng, the most prominent party elder, as the main decision maker of the party. Nevertheless, I'm glad we know what we do now. Number 2, CIA interrogation tapes. The CIA interrogation videotapes destruction occurred on November 9th of 2005. Now the videotapes were made by the United States Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, during interrogations of al-Qaeda suspects Abu Zubaydah and Abd al-Rahim al-Nashiri in 2002 at a CIA black site prison in Thailand. 90 tapes were made of Zubaydah and 2 of al-Nashiri. 12 tapes depict interrogations using enhanced interrogation techniques. We've already talked about those today. I talked about them in detail for a reason. Yee. Soon after the taping had stopped though, CIA clandestine operations officers were pushing for the tapes to be destroyed. However, the general counsel of the CIA, Scott W. Mueller, advised the CIA director, George Tenet, to maybe not do that on their authority. Instead, Mueller notified the House and Senate Intelligence Committees in February of 2003 that the CIA would like to have them destroyed, please. Representatives Porter Gross, who later served as CIA director, and Jane Harman thought that would be politically and legally pretty risky. So beginning in 2003, lawyers for Zacarias Masui asked for videotapes of interrogations of detainees that might help, prove that Zacarias was not involved in the September 11th attacks. In May of 2005, Senator Jay Rockefeller made a request on behalf of the Senate Judiciary Committee for the CIA to turn over 100 documents related to the alleged torment of prisoners in American custody. In September, after Porter Gross was named as new director of the CIA, Rockefeller renewed his request. Both times he mentioned the videotapes, which undoubtedly sent a shiver through the agency. From May till November of 2005, Judge Leonie Brinkema was also pressuring the CIA to turn over any videotapes of detainee interrogations as evidence in said trial. On November 14th, the Department of Justice told the court that the CIA did not possess the videotapes that were requested. Days after the photographs from Abu Ghraib became public in May of 2004, the CIA tapes were discussed among CIA and White House lawyers. Mueller, representing the CIA, met with Alberto Gonzales, David Addington, and John B. Bellinger III. The three White House lawyers recommended that the tapes not be destroyed. The tapes and their destruction became public knowledge in December of 2007, when the New York Times advised the Bush administration that they had acquired and planned to publish information about the destruction of tapes made of the interrogation, believed to show instances of waterboarding and other forms of possible punishment. Michael Hayden, the director of the CIA, sent a letter to the CIA staff the next day, briefing them on the destruction of said tapes. Hayden asserted that key members of Congress had been briefed on the existence of said tapes and the plans for their destruction. Now, going back to Jay Rockefeller, the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, disputed Hayden's assertion, saying that he only learned of the tapes in 2006, a year after their destruction. Now, a criminal investigation by a Department of Justice special prosecutor, John Durham, decided in 2010 to not file any criminal charges related to destroying the videotapes, which I think that's wrong. Anybody else? Number 1, Snowden. In 2013, the leaks from Edward Snowden, an intelligence community insider, revealed insane details about the US government's actions in covertly surveying, millions of Americans. The surveillance program came in the wake of the 9/11 attacks, with government officials seeing a need to beef up security programs and surveillance operations to scope out potential criminal and, other really bad threats. The leaks from Snowden, however, revealed that the government was collecting information from regular citizens, not just potential threats. The revelations from Snowden, a, national security contractor who later fled to Hong Kong and eventually Russia, and was federally charged with the theft of government property and other offenses, also revealed that US programs were used to spy on foreign governments. The leaks showed that the American government bugged a number of European Union offices and spied on at least 38 foreign embassies. The highly classified documents that were leaked by Snowden, who was viewed by some as either a brave whistleblower or a government traitor, ushered in newfound angst for Americans over their digital footprint and personal data, a fight that's still playing out today. And that brings us to the end of our time, and I feel like I say this a lot lately, but my brain's spinning. If that's all the stuff we do know, what's stuff that we don't? If you enjoyed my ramblings today, could you help us out by giving this video a like, subscribing if you aren't already, hit the bell for more government criticisms from us here at Top 5 Scary Videos, and I'll see y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.